My name is Ashley. I am 26 years old. I work in digital marketing. I pay my own bills, I always have. And the day my parents sat me down and told me I had until Sunday to pack my things and get out of my childhood home, I did not cry. I did not argue. I did not beg for more time or ask them to reconsider or fall apart on the kitchen floor the way they expected me to. I smiled. I said okay. And I walked back upstairs. Because what they did not know, what they could not have known, was that I had already been quietly, carefully, completely leaving for 8 months. They thought they were punishing me. They were handing me my freedom. This is what happened. Let me start at the end. Because the end is where you need to begin to understand everything. It was a Monday morning in November. Cold and gray outside. The kind of morning where the sky looks like it hasn't decided what it wants to do yet. I was standing at the window of my apartment, and I want you to hear that word. My apartment. My name on the lease. My deposit paid. My key on my own keychain. An apartment my parents had never seen, in a building they didn't know existed, in a neighborhood they had no idea I had been quietly making my own for the past several weeks. I was holding a cup of coffee, fresh brewed the way I liked it, strong with just a splash of oat milk. I had bought that oat milk myself. I had bought everything in that kitchen myself. Every plate, every glass, every small ordinary beautiful thing in that space was mine. Chosen by me. Paid for by me. Part of a life I had been building in silence for longer than anyone in my family realized. My phone was on the kitchen counter behind me. I heard it buzz. I did not turn around. It buzzed again. And again. And then it started ringing. That persistent, cutting ring that means someone is calling, not texting, someone who is not going to stop. I took a sip of my coffee. I watched a woman across the street walk her dog. A big golden retriever who kept stopping to smell absolutely everything, deeply unbothered by any schedule or urgency. A kid in a yellow jacket was being pulled along the sidewalk by his dad, half running to keep up with his own excitement. A delivery truck was backing carefully into a narrow driveway, the driver's face perfectly calm and focused. Everything outside looked completely, perfectly ordinary. And inside my chest, for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt something that matched it. Peace. Not the fragile kind. Not the held breath kind where you're waiting for something to shatter it. The real kind. The deep kind. The kind that lives in your bones. My phone rang again. I turned around and looked at the screen. I watched it ring out. Then immediately, Dad. Then my sister Megan, her name lighting up the screen with an urgency I could feel even from across the room. Then Mom again. I set my phone face down on the counter, picked up my coffee and went and sat at my kitchen table. My table in my kitchen, in my apartment, in my life. And I thought about the Sunday morning 6 days ago when my father sat at a different kitchen table with his morning coffee and delivered 7 words like he was reading from a shopping list. You have until Sunday to get out. He thought those words were the end of something. He had no idea they were the beginning. To understand everything that happened, you need to understand who I am and where I come from. Because none of this makes sense without the context. And the context, the full, honest 26-year context, is something I have spent a long time sitting with. I am the oldest daughter. The first child. The one who arrived before my parents had figured out who they were as people, let alone who they wanted to be as parents. My sister Megan came 3 years later, and by the time she arrived, something had shifted in that house in a way that I couldn't have named as a child but understood perfectly as an adult. Megan was the do-over. The one they got right. The one they poured everything into once they realized they had something worth pouring into. And I was the practice run. I want to be fair here. I don't think my parents sat down and consciously decided to treat their daughters differently. I don't think there was ever a conversation where they said, okay, this one gets everything and this one figures it out on her own. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't calculated. It was something quieter and in some ways much harder to name and much harder to fight. It was just the water we swam in, the air in that house. And it touched everything. When I was 7 years old and Megan was 4, I fell off my bike in the driveway and scraped both my knees badly enough that they bled through my jeans. My mom came out, looked at me, handed me a paper towel and said, "Go clean yourself up, you're fine." Then she went back inside and I sat on the front step and cleaned my own knees and told myself it didn't hurt as badly as it did. 3 years later, Megan fell off the same bike, barely scraped one elbow, and my mother carried her inside, sat her on the counter, put 3 different kinds of antiseptic on the scrape, gave her a popsicle for being brave, and spent 20 minutes telling her what a tough girl she was. I watched that from the doorway and thought, I must have done something wrong. I must be the kind of person who doesn't deserve the popsicle. I spent a long time thinking that. School was the same story written over and over in different handwriting. When I struggled with math in 5th grade, and I did struggle genuinely, I am not a natural numbers person and I never have been, my parents told me I needed to try harder. That was the entirety of the support system. Try harder. When I asked for a tutor, my dad said tutors were for kids who didn't apply themselves. So I applied myself, alone at the kitchen table with a textbook and a calculator and a lot of quiet determination. When Megan struggled with reading comprehension in 4th grade, 3 weeks later there was a tutor named Patricia who came to the house every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. My parents told everyone Patricia had made a huge difference. They never mentioned that I had sat at that same kitchen table and figured things out entirely by myself. Holidays, birthdays, milestones. The pattern repeated itself so consistently that after a while I stopped being surprised by it and started simply cataloging it. The way you catalog weather. Not because it stops affecting you, but because you've accepted that this is simply what it does. My 16th birthday. I came downstairs to find my parents at the kitchen table drinking coffee. My mom had made pancakes. My favorite with blueberries. And there was a card propped against the orange juice glass. Inside, $40 and a note in my mom's handwriting that said, "Happy birthday, we love you." My dad looked up from his paper and said, 16 already, huh? Make it a good one. That was my 16th birthday. Megan's 16th birthday. My parents started planning it 2 months in advance. There was a party with 23 of her friends, a DJ, a catered spread, fairy lights in the backyard, a custom birthday cake from the bakery on 4th Street. And there was the white Honda Civic with the red bow on the hood, parked in the driveway, which my father filmed on his phone while my mother cried happy tears and Megan screamed so loud the neighbors came out to look. I watched from the upstairs window. I remember thinking, not with bitterness, just with the particular exhaustion of someone who has been watching the same film for a very long time. I remember thinking, this is just how it is. And for a long time that thought was enough to keep me going. This is just how it is. Make peace with it. Work around it. Build anyway. So I built. At 16 I got a part-time job at the coffee shop on Mason Street. Not because I had to, but because I had realized early that the less I depended on my parents for things, the less power their indifference had over me. I worked Friday evenings and Saturday mornings. I saved every dollar I made. I bought my own things. My own books, my own clothes, my own small dignities. At 18 I paid for my own college applications. The filing fees, the test prep course, the application materials. With money I had saved from 2 years of weekend shifts. When I got into a good school, my parents said, "That's wonderful, Ashley. We're proud of you." And then my dad sat me down and explained that they would not be able to contribute much to tuition. That I would need to figure it out. Loans, scholarships, work-study, whatever I could manage. That they believed in me. Megan's college tuition, all 4 years, was paid in full by my parents, plus a monthly allowance for spending, plus a furnished apartment near campus because the dorms were too loud and Megan had always needed her space. I worked 2 jobs through 3 years of night classes and graduated with a degree I had paid for with my own hands and a pride in that fact that nobody in my family ever fully understood. By 23 I was in digital marketing. By 24 I had my own client list. By 25 I was a senior account manager at a firm I had interviewed for 8 times before they hired me because I was not the kind of person who stopped trying. And through all of it, I came home every evening to a house where I was background noise. Where my achievements were acknowledged with nods and one-word responses before the conversation moved back to Megan. Always Megan, the center of a solar system I had long since stopped trying to orbit. I kept contributing to the household bills. And simply waited for the right moment to finish what she had already started. The apartment came first. I knew what I was looking for. Close to work. I didn't want to add commute stress to an already significant life transition. Good natural light. I had lived in a house with small north-facing windows my entire childhood, and I had decided that natural light was going to be non-negotiable in my adult life. A building that felt like somewhere a person could actually live, not just sleep. And within a budget I could comfortably afford on my own without stretching. I found it within 2 weeks of starting to look. 12th floor, 2 bedrooms. One for sleeping, one that I planned to turn into a home office because I had dreams about what my career could look like if I had actual space to build it. The kind of building with a gym and a rooftop and a lobby that didn't smell like someone else's cooking. 12 minutes from my office on a good traffic day. I toured it 3 times before I signed anything. The first time to see if I liked it. The second time to look for the things I might have missed when I liked it too much to see clearly. The third time to stand in the empty living room and ask myself, can I make this mine? The answer every time was yes. I signed the lease on a Thursday afternoon in March. Move-in date, the 1st of December. 8 months away. I paid the deposit from my personal savings. The account my parents knew existed but whose balance they dramatically underestimated, because they had stopped paying attention to what I was doing with my money around the same time they stopped paying attention to anything else about me. I told nobody. Not a friend. Not a colleague. Not Grandma Ruth, not yet. Nobody. I drove home that evening, had dinner with my parents, listened to 20 minutes of Megan-related conversation, went upstairs and started planning the next step. The money was the second thing. I had been contributing $500 a month to the household bills for 3 years. 36 months. $18,000, give or take, that had gone into a house that had never once made me feel fully at home in it. I am not saying I regret it. Contributing felt like integrity to me, like proof to myself that I was not the person they sometimes seemed to believe I was. But I had also started to realize, with the particular clarity that comes from sitting alone in the dark making big decisions, that I had been paying rent in a house where I was not wanted. That needed to stop. I did not stop immediately. Stopping immediately would have created noise, questions, comments at dinner, my mom's particular way of bringing up money with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Instead, I began quietly redirecting. 3 months after signing the lease, I opened a completely new account at a completely different bank. Not the bank my parents and I had always used, not the one where my salary was deposited, a new one, clean and separate. I began transferring money into it every month. The household contribution, which I tapered off slowly enough that nobody noticed for 4 months. Additional savings from every paycheck. The commission from the Henderson account, which had finally closed by then and which was significantly larger than anything I had earned before. When my mom finally mentioned, gently over dinner with that particular smile, that I seemed to be a little behind on the household fund lately, I said I would sort it out and change the subject. She never mentioned it again, which told me everything I needed to know about how seriously I had been taken as a financial contributor to that household. The belongings were the third piece. And this is the part one still find extraordinary. I started moving things out in April. 1 box, sometimes 2 every other weekend. Saturday mornings when my parents were out running errands, Sunday afternoons when my dad was at golf and my mom was visiting her sister. Books first because I had a lot of them and nobody in that house read. Then clothes. Slowly, strategically, the way you thin a wardrobe without it looking thinned. Then the things that mattered most to me. My grandmother's photographs, the journals I had kept since I was 13, the small pieces of art I had collected for myself over the years, one by one from weekend markets and second-hand shops. I had a storage unit 3 miles from my new apartment. Climate-controlled, secure, organized. I labeled every box. I knew exactly where everything was. The important thing, the thing I want you to understand, is that I was careful. I was not careless or rushed or emotional about this. I had grown up in a house where I had learned to be precise, to be watchful, to move through spaces without disturbing them. I left things arranged exactly as they had been. A specific book at a particular angle on the nightstand. A jacket draped over the desk chair in the exact way it had always been draped. Small, deliberate signals to myself that nobody had come in, nobody had noticed, nothing had changed. And nothing had. In 8 months. 8 months of systematically, methodically moving my entire life out of that house, one careful carload at a time. Neither of my parents once stepped foot inside my bedroom. Not once. I know this because nothing was ever disturbed. Not the book. Not the jacket. Not the small framed photo of me and Grandma Ruth that I left on the desk until the very last week because I couldn't bring myself to move it sooner. Nobody came in. Nobody checked. Nobody wondered. By the time my father delivered his Sunday deadline, cool, casual, like he was mentioning a change in the weather, my room was 90% empty. The furniture was gone. The walls were bare. The closet held 4 items of clothing on 3 hangers, deliberately chosen to look like a closet that belonged to someone who was still there. He thought he was telling me to leave. I was already almost entirely gone. And he had absolutely no idea. Face screaming in fear. The Sunday it happened was the first week of November. The kind of November morning that arrives with a cold that feels personal. The The kind that gets into the house through the gaps around the windows and under the doors and settles into the floor so that even with the heat on, everything feels faintly chilled. I came downstairs at 8:30 in my sweats, hair in a messy bun, looking for coffee and thinking about absolutely nothing in particular. I was in a decent mood. I had worked a half day on Friday, had a slow Saturday, and was looking forward to a quiet Sunday that involved reading and not much else. My dad was at the kitchen table. This was normal. My dad was almost always at the kitchen table on Sunday mornings with his coffee and his newspaper, a habit so consistent it had become part of the furniture of my childhood. My mom was standing by the counter with her arms crossed. This was less normal. My mom standing with her arms crossed in the kitchen on a Sunday morning meant something had been discussed, decided, and was now about to be delivered. I had learned to read that particular posture the way sailors read clouds. I poured myself a coffee. I sat down at the table. And my dad put down his cup, looked at me, not unkindly, which somehow made it worse, and said, "We've made a decision. Your sister is moving back home. She needs the space. You have until Sunday to pack your things and leave." He said it the way you say something you've rehearsed enough times that it has lost all its weight. Flat and final and surprisingly gentle, which was its own particular cruelty. Sunday. This Sunday. The Sunday that was 6 days away from the Sunday I was currently sitting in. I felt something happen in my chest. Not a drop exactly. More like a stillness. The way water goes flat right before something hits it. I looked at my dad. I looked at my mom, who was still looking at her coffee cup, still with her arms crossed, still with the expression of someone who has already had this conversation in her head and gotten through all the hard parts. I thought about my apartment. Ready. Furnished. Waiting. With a move-in date of December 1st. 5 days away. I thought about the storage unit. Labeled. Organized. I thought about the 90% empty room upstairs that my parents had not looked inside in 8 months. And something happened inside me that I can only describe as the particular satisfaction of a plan that has been running quietly and carefully for a very long time, arriving exactly where it was always going. I smiled. Not a brave smile. Not a bitter smile. A genuine, real, from somewhere deep smile that I could feel in my chest the same way you feel the first warm day of spring. Like a loosening, like something has been holding and has finally let go. And I said, "Hate it." Just that. 2 words. Quietly. Without drama. My dad looked at me for a moment with an expression I had never quite seen on his face before. Somewhere between confused and unsettled. Like a man who has prepared himself for a storm that has not arrived. My mom looked up from her coffee. Neither of them said anything. I finished my coffee, rinsed my cup, put it on the drying rack, and went back upstairs. I closed my bedroom door behind me. Sat on the edge of the stripped bare mattress. The only piece of furniture still in the room, the last thing I had not yet moved. And I opened the Notes app on my phone and made a list. Storage unit. Confirm Saturday delivery window. Done. Apartment. Confirm early access December 1st. Done. Separate bank account. Final transfer this week. Done. Cancel household contribution. and listened to my mother describe a piece of furniture that no longer existed in that house. And I felt something inside me settle so completely, so finally, so absolutely, that I almost laughed out loud right there in the hallway. Instead, I went upstairs and finished packing the last 3 boxes. I called Grandma Ruth on Thursday afternoon. Grandma Ruth is my father's mother. She is 71 years old, 5 feet 2 inches tall, has silver hair she keeps cut short and sharp, and has not sugar-coated a single word she has ever said to any person in my living memory. She grew up with very little, built everything she had through work and patience and a particular kind of intelligence that has nothing to do with school, and she has approximately zero tolerance for self-pity, dishonesty, or people who take other people for granted. She is also the woman who lent my parents $40,000 7 years ago, during a period when my dad's business was struggling and they were genuinely in a difficult position. A loan that has been partially repaid. I know this because Grandma Ruth told me, with the particular directness she brings to all financial conversations, that she had received back about $14,000 of the 40 and had stopped expecting the rest some years ago. Grandma Ruth and I have always existed on the same frequency. From the time I was small, she seemed to see something in me that was invisible to everyone else in the family, and she had quietly, consistently been the one person in my life who asked follow-up questions, who remembered what I had told her last time, who called on my birthday unprompted and actually wanted to know how I was, not as a courtesy but because she wanted to know. I called her that Thursday and I told her everything. All of it. The apartment, the storage unit, the 8 months, the separate bank account, the Sunday deadline, the conversation at the kitchen table, all of it. I told it flat, the way she liked to receive information. Facts first, feelings second, no editorializing. When I finished, there was a pause on the line. A long one. The kind of pause that means someone is not searching for words but deciding which of the many available words are the right ones. And then Grandma Ruth said, "Ashley, I have been waiting for this phone call for 3 years." She told me something that afternoon that I had not known. 6 months ago. 6 months before the Sunday deadline, 6 months before any of the events I've described to you, my parents had called Grandma Ruth and asked her for an additional $15,000. Not a repayment of the original loan in any direction. A new ask. To help Megan with a down payment on a condo. Because Megan had found a place she loved and the numbers were just a little short and it would mean so much. Grandma Ruth had said no. Firmly, clearly, without room for misunderstanding. And my father, her only son, the boy she had raised and worked for and given $40,000 to when he needed it, had told her that she was being selfish. That family was supposed to take care of family. That she had more than enough and she was choosing not to help and she should think carefully about what that said about her character. Grandma Ruth had not spoken to my father since that conversation. 6 months of silence. 6 months that my dad had apparently described to the rest of the family as Grandma Ruth being difficult and unreasonable. Never mentioning, of course, what had prompted the silence or what he had said to cause it. When Grandma Ruth finished telling me this, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want to do something for you, Ashley. I have wanted to for a long time. I should have done it sooner and I didn't and I'm sorry for that. Will you let me?" I said, "Grandma, you really don't have to," she said. "Ashley, I'm not asking permission. I'm asking you to let me." That afternoon, $5,000 appeared in my new account. I was in the parking lot of a grocery store when I got the notification and I sat in my car for a very long time looking at it. Not because of the amount. Though the amount mattered, it was real and meaningful and helpful and I am not going to pretend otherwise. But because of what she said when I called her back to say thank you. She said, "That is 26 years of birthday money that should have been going directly to you all along instead of into that house. Consider it delivered late with interest." I sat in that parking lot for a long time. Not crying exactly. Not sad. Something more complicated and quieter than either of those things. The feeling of being seen finally and completely by the one person who had always been paying attention. I said, "I love you, Grandma." He said, "I know you do. Now go build something worth seeing." I drove home, made dinner for myself, went to bed, slept better than I had in years. Direct hit hold on, before we get to Saturday night and the letter and Monday morning and every single one of those 47 calls. If you are watching this right now and something in Ashley's story is sitting somewhere close to home, if you have ever been the one who kept quiet and kept building and kept showing up while someone else took up all the light, hit that like button right now, because this story is for you. And if this is your first time on this channel, welcome. Subscribe right now, because every week there are stories here that are going to make you feel genuinely, deeply seen. And honestly, they are going to make you believe that karma is real and patient and eventually always arrives. Saturday night. The letter. Scope. Fire. Saturday arrived with the particular quiet of a day that knows it matters. I was up before 6. The kind of awake that isn't about an alarm, that just happens when your body understands that something significant is ending and something else is beginning and it wants to be present for the transition. I made coffee, stood in my room, completely bare now, walls empty, floor clear. Nothing left but the stripped mattress and the desk in the corner and the small framed photo of me and Grandma Ruth that had been the last thing I allowed myself to pack, the very last, because some things you save for the end on purpose. My friend Jenna was meeting me at the storage unit at noon. The movers I had booked were arriving at the apartment at 2. By evening everything would be inside. By evening this would be over. I had one thing left to do. I sat down at the desk. I had been thinking about this letter for weeks. Not drafting it exactly, not writing and rewriting in my head the way you do when you're anxious about something. More like letting it settle into its final shape gradually, the way sediment settles in water when the water finally goes still. I knew what I wanted to say. I had known for a long time. I picked up a pen and I wrote. I started with the accounting. Not as an accusation, just as a record, because I believed they deserved to know the full picture even if they had never been curious about it while I was in the house. Every month of the household contribution. The amount, the date, starting from the first payment 3 years ago. 36 months at $500. The total at the bottom of the list, $18,000. I wrote, I am not asking for this back. I am telling you it existed because I think it's important that you know. Then I wrote about the rest. The college applications I had paid for myself. The 2 jobs through 3 years of night classes. The career I had built without anyone in this house ever really asking what I was building or why or how it was going. I wrote, I am telling you this not to make you feel guilty. I am telling you this because I am proud of it and I wanted you to know it, even if you weren't watching when it happened. And then the last paragraph. The one I had been carrying in me for the longest. I wrote, I have spent my whole life trying to figure out how to be enough for this family. I have tried being quiet enough, helpful enough, undemanding enough, successful enough. I don't think there was ever a configuration that would have worked, and I have made peace with that. I am leaving now. Not because I hate you, because I love myself enough to go. Please don't contact me unless there is a real emergency. I need space to become the person I have always been trying to be, without the weight of being invisible in my own home. I love you. I don't need you to understand this, but I wanted you to know. Ashley. I read it back once, folded it in thirds, sealed it in an envelope, wrote MM and Dad on the front in black marker in the clearest handwriting I had. I carried it downstairs and placed it in the exact center of the kitchen counter, where it could not be missed, where it would be the first thing anyone saw when they walked into that kitchen. Then I went back upstairs, picked up the last bag, already packed, had been for 3 days. Looked around my empty room one final time. I had grown up in this room. I had cried in this room and laughed in this room and lay awake in this room on hundreds of nights thinking about the future I was going to build for myself someday. The walls remembered all of it even if they showed none of it now. I said goodbye to it quietly inside myself in a way that felt right and complete. Then I walked downstairs through the living room out the front door and I pulled it close behind me. I did not look back. Not once. I got in my car and drove 12 minutes to my apartment, and Jenna was already there leaning against her truck eating a granola bar. And when I pulled up she looked at me and said, "How you doing?" And I said, "I'm good. I'm actually good." And she said, "Yeah, you are. Let's go get your stuff." We spent the afternoon moving. It was cold and there were 2 trips, and by the time everything was inside, my arms ached and my back ached, and I was deeply, completely satisfied in the way you only get when you have done something physical that was also emotionally necessary. By 7 that evening everything was my mom had helpfully suggested, figuring it out with the particular desperate energy of someone who has run out of time. I was in my apartment assembling a bookshelf. I had bought it myself from a shop I had found online, and it came in 4 pieces with hardware that required a specific kind of patience I had been building my whole life. I put it together in the afternoon while listening to a podcast about people who had started businesses from nothing. And by the time it was standing in the corner of my living room, solid and clean and exactly where I had imagined it, I felt a satisfaction so complete it was almost funny. Sunday night. Silence from my parents' house. No calls. No texts. Which meant they still hadn't gone upstairs. Still hadn't opened the door. Still hadn't found the letter. I went to sleep at 10:30 in my own bed in my own apartment and slept 8 straight hours without once waking up. Monday morning, I was up at 6:45. Made coffee. Stood at the window. Watched the neighborhood come to life in that particular slow Monday morning way, reluctant and gradual like something that knows it has a long week ahead. At 7:31 my phone lit up. I watched it. 7:32. Mom again. 7:35. Dad. Which meant Dad had seen the letter first, had called Mom downstairs, they had read it together, and Dad had held it together long enough to call me once before whatever he was feeling got too large to manage quietly. 7:38. Megan. Already based on the timing, crying. I could tell from the way the call came. the frantic back-to-back timing of someone who has just been told something that has upended their morning entirely. 7:41. Mom again. 7:43. Dad again. I watched every single one. Then I turned the phone face down, finished my coffee and made myself some toast. By 9 that morning there were 23 missed calls. By noon, 47. I know what happened in that house Monday morning because Grandma Ruth called me at 10. She had received a call from my dad at 8:15, his voice shaking in a way she said she had not heard since he was a teenager, and she told me everything. After reading the letter, after sitting at the kitchen table in silence for a period of time, Grandma Ruth estimated at around 15 minutes based on when he called her versus when she knew they must have found it, my dad had gone upstairs. He had walked down the hall to my room. He had put his hand on the door handle. And he had opened it. Empty. Not mostly empty. Not almost empty. Completely, entirely, absolutely empty. Bare walls. Bare floor. No furniture except the desk, which I had moved out on Saturday evening, my very last act before driving to Jenna's. So not even the desk. Just the stripped mattress on the floor that I had not been able to figure out how to move alone and had decided to leave. A room that looked like nobody had lived in it for a very long time. Because in every way that mattered, nobody had. My mom had started crying when she came upstairs and saw it. Not sad crying, panicked crying, the kind that happens when the reality of a situation arrives all at once rather than gradually and there is no time to adjust. The kind of crying that is really just shock wearing the most available costume. My dad had stood in the doorway for a long time, according to Grandma Ruth. Not moving. Just looking at the room. Then he had called her. Say, Mom. Ashley is gone. Her room is. There's nothing here. Her whole room. It's empty. We don't know where she is, we don't know when she did this, she must have been, he stopped. Then he said she must have been planning this for a long time. And Grandma Ruth, 71 years old, 5'2", sharp as a tack, not a single sugar-coated word available in her entire vocabulary, said, yes, she was. I know where she is. She is safe and she is fine and she is exactly where she should be. And I think what you need to do right now before you call her again is sit down and think very carefully about what you are actually calling to say. Because she is not coming back. Not unless things change. Significantly and genuinely and for real. A long silence on the line. Then my dad said, did you know about this? Grandma Ruth said, I knew this day was coming. I've known for years. The question that matters, sweetheart, is whether you did. He didn't answer. He hung up. And then called me 4 more times. I let every single one go to voicemail. I finished my toast. Washed my plate. Put it on the drying rack next to the coffee cup. Stood at the window for a while longer. Watched the FedEx truck finish its deliveries and pull away. Watched the woman with the golden retriever come back around the block for a second lap because her dog was having too good a morning to stop. And I felt peace. Complete, uninterrupted, all the way down peace. The kind that has been a very long time coming. I did not respond to any of the calls that Monday. Or Tuesday. I let the first full week pass in silence. Not as a punishment, not to make a point, but because I genuinely needed the space. Space to settle into my apartment, into my life. Into the new quiet of waking up every morning in a place where the air didn't carry the particular weight of being overlooked. Space to become, slowly and without urgency, the person I had been building toward for a very long time. Megan texted on Wednesday. The message was long and emotional and contained several sentences that began with "I can't believe" and ended with "how could you," and I read it once, put my phone down and made dinner. My mom texted on Thursday. Shorter. Quieter. Said, Ashley, we're worried. Please just let us know you're okay. I texted back 2 words. I'm okay. And put the phone down again. It was 3 weeks after Monday morning when my dad sent the text. Not a call. A text. which told me something, that he had sat with this long enough to know that calling was not the right move, that I needed to be approached carefully, that whatever he said needed to be something I could read in my own time and respond to in my own time without the pressure of a voice on the line. Said Ashley. Your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking. We miss you. We want to talk, not to ask you to come back, not to argue about what happened. Just to talk, if you're willing. We're sorry it took us this long to say that. I read it 4 times. And I thought about the 17-year-old version of me sitting on the front step cleaning my own scraped knees with a paper towel because nobody had come to help. I thought about the Tuesday evening when I came home with the best news of my career and left the table without a single follow-up question. I thought about 8 months of early Saturday mornings in storage units and careful, patient, deliberate work. I thought about Grandma Ruth saying, "Go build something worth seeing." I thought about my bookshelf assembled by my own hands, standing solid in the corner of my living room. And I picked up my phone and I typed, "I'm willing to talk. But things have to be genuinely different. Not different for a few weeks, different for real. I'll reach out when I'm ready. Please give me the space to do that on my own timeline." I hit send, put my phone on the counter, poured myself a coffee, walked to the window of my apartment, my name on the lease, my key, my life, and watched the street below looking exactly as it always did. Ordinary and calm and full of people going about their days, carrying their own invisible weight, building their own invisible things. I was 26 years old. I had $42,000 worth of patience documented in a letter on a kitchen counter. I had $5,000 worth of being truly seen, from the one person who had always been paying attention. I had a bookshelf I built with my own hands. And I had a life, finally, completely 100% all the way down. That was mine. If Ashley's story sat somewhere close to home today, drop a comment right now and tell me, what would you have written in that letter? Would you have said more? Would you have said less? Would you have left it at all? I read every single comment on this channel. Every one. And if this is your first time here, welcome. Please subscribe because every single week there are stories on this channel that are going to make you feel genuinely seen, genuinely less alone, and absolutely certain that building quietly and patiently and with complete faith in yourself, it always pays off. Always. Like this video if Ashley's piece gave you peace today. Share it with someone who needs it. And I will see you in the next one.